Joining us now, Congressman Adam Schiff, the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, thanks so much for being with us. What's your reaction to what Donald Trump Jr. just said?
Well, he apparently forgets the fact that in real time what happened last year was the director of the FBI talked about an investigation into Hillary Clinton even 10 days or less before an election, but did not tell the country that there was also an investigation going on of the Trump campaign over a far more serious matter. That is whether individuals of the Trump campaign had been suborned essentially as agents of a foreign power. So for the most consequential difference between how these investigations were handled, it cut very much in Donald Trump's favor, and that seems to be something that Donald Trump Jr. would rather ignore.
He says there are people who don't want to let America be America, suggesting there's some kind of conspiracy perhaps to undermine his father's administration. Is there any conspiracy like that?
No, but you have to realize this is, I guess, a Trump family characteristic, and that is to always view themselves as the victim of something, victim of a rigged system, victim of an unfair FBI, victim of unfair press coverage. This seems to be a genetic trait. But the reality is that I think our FBI and our Department of Justice have a lot of really dedicated public servants whose work is being maligned right now because there's an effort to tear down those institutions, to tear down what Bob Mueller may find, to discredit it in advance by casting doubt on the integrity of these institutions. In the meantime, of course, they do enormous damage to our democracy and undermine public confidence in the administration of justice.
Trying to undermine Robert Mueller's investigation. There are questions that you've raised about whether the Republicans in a way trying to undermine what's going on even in the House Intelligence Committee. You have an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal today where you say you've made progress, but you also say Republican members have posed challenges. Explain that.
Well, there are a number of steps the Republicans are taking which don't make sense from an investigative point of view, and they're a departure from how we have operated in the past. Probably the most graphic example, they've scheduled key interviews out of state, including one tomorrow, when we have another vote on the tax bill, and we have a vote potentially tomorrow to keep the government open. So why would they be scheduling interviews out of state if they simply didn't want us to be present during the interviews? Now, these are interviews with witnesses that we've been asking them to bring in for months, and they've sat on. So what is the headlong rush to do it now, if not to try to end the investigation? And that's my fear. We saw on display in the Judiciary Committee last week an effort to discredit Mueller, discredit the FBI, discredit the Justice Department, to shut down Mueller. We're seeing in our committee, in the Intelligence Committee, an effort to bring the congressional investigation to a premature conclusion, and that ought to concern all Americans who want to get to the truth.
Is this something that either the chairman of the committee, Devin Nunes, who I know isn't involved with the Russia investigation, or Mike Conaway, who is running the Russia investigation for a committee, have either of them said to you that they are trying to shut this down soon?
Well, they've been, I think, fairly vague when I ask, why are we scheduling witnesses 3 a day when it took months for you to schedule some of the witnesses we've asked for a long time ago? Why don't we have these witnesses that you're scheduling out of state come before our committee after the holidays? Why are we not scheduling any interviews for the new year when there are dozens of interviews to be scheduled? I can't get an answer, and that tells me that there may very well be marching orders from the top that they got to bring this to an end. And we have seen Steve Bannon, the president, and others amp up the heat on Congress to shut us down. Now, the Republican senators have acknowledged the president weighed in with them to try to get them to shut down their investigation. The House members have not been willing to comment about whether they received similar pressure from the White House, but they certainly seem to be acting that way.
They're acting like they're being pressured from the White House. I want to play you something that we heard from the former Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper. Obviously, the entire Russia investigation, at its core, is a question about whether Russia tried to influence the election, whether Russia has undue influence on the Trump campaign and maybe at the beginning stages of the Trump presidency. This is what DNI Clapper, former DNI Clapper, said about phone calls between Vladimir Putin and President Trump over the weekend.
I think this past weekend is illustrative of what a great case officer Vladimir Putin is. He knows how to handle an asset, and that's what he's doing with the president.
Do you think President Trump is an asset to Vladimir Putin? He's treating him like some kind of intelligence asset?
Well, I think the president is allowing himself to be manipulated by Putin. Putin knows, because the Kremlin does a psychological profile, I'm sure, of world leaders, what the president's strengths and weaknesses are, and knows, because this is sort of in plain sight, that flattery will get you just about everything with this president. And so in his year-end comments, Vladimir Putin talks about how great the American economy is. And why are some people in the United States questioning the legitimacy of his election when, of course, the Russians would never interfere in our affairs? These are talking points that could have been written by Sarah Huckabee Sanders. But the president of Russia, Putin, understands how to push this president's buttons, how to get this president to do effectively his bidding, and praise is the way to do it. And so in that respect, it is a bit like the relationship between a case officer and asset. You need to know the motivations of your asset, what will get the asset to do the things you want. I wouldn't push that analogy too far, but the reality is I think Putin is using all of the tactics you would expect him to use. The only surprising thing is how well they seem to work with the president.
Congressman Adam Schiff, we know you have an unexpected tax vote tomorrow morning, so we'll let you